Hello and welcome back to another video from me. Long time ago I made the last video, and today I want to present a little bit the Gdx Utilities website that I posted like a week ago or something on my channel in this, how's it called, this community post that you can share on YouTube. And also a couple of weeks before that I asked if I should show the Angular project and how it works on GitHub and everything. And today I want to share my knowledge with you and also talk a little bit about the AI functionality in general and also specifically in the JetBrains IDE, because I used it quite a lot recently in my personal projects. And yeah, want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, so what happened since the last couple of months? So first of all, I had in mind that I wanted to create a website for the Masamune project as well. And that was actually the first project where I tried out Angular again. The last time when I checked out Angular was, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And also with this project, I wanted to find out if it is possible to host an Angular app on GitHub pages so that it's for free. And actually it's working. So that was quite nice. So this is the website. It's nothing big or huge. The text is simply copied over from the itch.io page. It has the play button where it guides you to the game itself from the other repository, and it has a few menu items like the enemies, where it shows you the different enemies of the game with some informations and actions. Then it has the items, which are sorted or grouped by weapon, by the different item types, let's say, where it gives you some information, just some basic stuff and basic layout. And finally, the actions, so what kind of things can be executed in the game. There are offensive actions, defensive actions, and certain passive actions with a little bit of a description. And how it works is that basically this website here is then passing some information from the Masamune project. There, initially, I was passing the XML from the tiled map, because in the objects TSX there is all or most of the information from the game is in this objects tile set. Do I still have it open? Yeah, perfect. So in here I had this objects tile set for the Masamune game, and then when I click on an item or a character, there's certain information in this tile set, in this objects TSX, and I passed this information from there initially. But there is a couple of information missing, which is just hard-coded it in the game itself, so in the Kotlin code. And at that point, I thought, instead of then parsing the different Kotlin files with a weird approach, I simply created a new utility class there in the util projects, which is then creating some JSON files in a web folder. Very, very simple stuff with, how's it called, Kotlin X serialization. And there I can use all the functionality that I have in the core projects to, for example, load an item, load an NPC, and then extract it to the JSON format, and then use these JSON files for the website itself, which is also a lot easier because in JavaScript you can easily, or out of the box, parse the JSON files and bring it into a specific type or object nature. So that was then quite straightforward. But that's not the important thing that I want to talk about today. So let me close that. The important one would be the Gdx Quilly Utilities, because yesterday I worked on that, and from my point of view, what I needed in most of my games is finished so far. But please, if you have any feedback or any tool or utility that you also need, then please let me know. For example, create an issue or write in the comment section below that video to let me know what else I could add to this page. So currently, to show it a little bit, it contains 3 different utilities. I don't know, I have dark mode fanboys in my community, so I will switch to the dark mode. And in here you see there are 3 different utilities. The first one is the tile extruder, which I often need. I will switch to light mode because in my room it's currently dark and I almost cannot read that. So the tileset extruder is basically when you render a tiled map in your game, and maybe you notice that from time to time you have then horizontal or vertical lines in between the tiles, so some sort of texture bleeding, it's called like that. And the solution to that is that when you have a tile set, let me upload one, so I don't know, just an arbitrary one. I think I have Sunnyland or whatever it's called. Yep. And there, it doesn't really matter. Just one of the images, I don't know, Fort of Illusion. Let's take this one. And what this extruder is doing, so it splits the entire graphic into a grid with a certain size. So for example, in that case, 16 by 16. If there would be spacing or margin from the tile set, you can specify that here as well. And then it extrudes the border pixel of each grid to the amount of pixels that you specify here. So for example, here, a grid of 16 by 16 will become, the extrusion is on both sides, so it would be 24 by 24, if I'm not mistaken, because 4 pixels are then added to the top, bottom, left, and right of each tile in that grid. And from what I know, the edge pixel is used and simply replicated for that filling up thingy. And in the end, with that, you avoid then this texture bleeding. For example, in libgdx, when you render something with the tiled map layer. So in here, you just upload it, you specify the size and non-integer number of rows. Okay, so I don't know the size of this one. Let me pick a correct one. That one seems to have, I don't know what kind of dimensions. So I cannot split it up. Unfortunately, I don't have. Okay, that one here. Here it works. So here's the original image, and below here you get then the extruded tile set. This one is not a tile set, but I think you get the idea. You can change here how much pixels it should extrude. Simply gets that bigger. And you can then download the extruded image. And this is something that I usually need or always need when I use tiled map rendering in libgdx. And behind the scenes, what it is using is, maybe I can find it. I think it's this one. Yeah, okay, that's a web page, but there should also be a GitHub project. This one, I think, yeah. It's that one. So it uses this utility in the background. There is a node package manager dependency somewhere mentioned on that page. I don't know, this one here. So install tile extruder. And then it basically uses this functionality here in the background. So that's it. So that's the tileset extruder utility. The next one is the sprite sheet splitter, which is also needed very often. So also here an example would be what I had or what I used in the Masamune project. I have here a sprite sheet with a couple of special effects, and there are 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think 13 in a row, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines. Yeah. So what it does, it then simply splits up the graphic into separate tiles. We can also rename that. So for example, if in your texture atlas you want to call that, I don't know what that is, maybe a smoke, for example. Then we have smoke 0 and so on. And then you can download it as a zip file. Let me store it here and open it up. So in here you get then the different split graphics here, also with underscore and then the number behind that, because that is also a useful functionality when using the texture atlas in libgdx, because then if you create an animation, for example, for the smoke, then it uses a special index approach, and then it's very easy to create the animation. So the naming convention like that is also very useful. And there is some optional stuff because sometimes you just want, for example, the blue row in here. So we could skip the first 26 tiles. Then it starts with the blue ones. And maybe we don't need all the other ones. So that would be then, I don't know, let's see, also 26. So it's stops not at 23, then 39, 42 would be the next one. I messed something up. I don't know, 50, whatever. You get the idea. So the last n tiles are then skipped. What would it be? I cannot calculate it per head. 77, 78 would be that case. Okay, so like this. So now I would only get the blue smoke frames out of that sprite sheet and can download it as a zip file. So for that, I always used ImageMagick usually. And since I normally cannot remember the different command line tools, I'm not a big fan of CLI commands. I always tend to forget them. So that's why in my repositories, I always mention here with ImageMagick what kind of commands I'm using here so that I can copy paste it over and use it in another project. But now I don't need to do that anymore because I have now here this tool here online available, which does that for me. And also here for your information in the background, it uses a library called GIMP, which is Java Image Manipulation something program. I don't know. So it's like ImageMagick, I would say, but specifically for JavaScript. And from my point of view, it has the same functionality as ImageMagick. So in that case, it can split, for example, an image. And the last tool would be the image combiner. So where is that needed? It's not always needed, but I had that, for example, let me also go to Masamune. There would be a tile set, and I have, for example, a ground tile set, plants and flags, and I want to use them as a single texture or single graphic in tiled. So what I would need to do, maybe also this tile set here, I would need to combine those four images together. For example, in a 2x2 grid, so 2 images at the top, 2 at the bottom, would look like this. Then I save that graphic and finally use the tile extruder to make the tile set then with the extruded tiles in between so that I don't get the texture bleeding in the end. And yeah, that is the simplest approach for me to combine images. It's also possible to, for example, define it should be just one row, one column and 4 rows. Then the images are all below, or 4 columns and 1 row, then they are next to each other. And what I find quite nice, you can also rearrange the order. So for example, maybe the first image should be the tile set, so we swap that with the plans. Then the flags should be at the end, so it's simple drag and drop functionality. And then the order is now here a different one. It's always the order that you see here, so there's some drag and drop functionality to make that happen. And in the end, you can also simply download that image, and that's it. I would say, yeah, those are the 3 utilities that I have here currently. And yeah, if you need anything else, or if you have an idea of what could be added as well, if you frequently use something, then just let me know, then I can try to add that to that page as well. An important part is that everything that runs here, there is no backend, because if I would need a backend, I would most likely need to pay some service because I need to host something somewhere. And I don't want to pay for anything. I only want the free stuff. So everything that happens here is on the client side, on your browser. So if you upload something, if you do something super crazy, then it's your own machine that you are going to kill. And that's it. There is no back-end processes, which is also a limitation to that approach that I'm showing then in a moment. And yeah, so for the people who are interested how that works. So basically, I won't go into the details of Angular. I think that's not really relevant and also not important. So it's just I created a new Angular project, some components and everything, so that I had this app. And then the important parts are, or there are two important parts for that in order to work. The first one is that when you go to your GitHub repository under settings, there is the pages. And there you need to enable the GitHub pages and select here deploy from a branch. And the branch should, I think you need to create it, if I remember correctly, and you need to call it GitHub pages. And I think this root is pre-filled. So those two things, those are the important ones. So deploy from branch, and you need a GitHub pages branch. So that's the important setup, that you have this separate branch available. And then you just need GitHub Action. That one now is, of course, related to the Angular project itself, but I will guide you through. So whenever there is a push to the master branch, or if I want to manually push or start the workflow, that's this workflow dispatch as a GitHub action, then it does something. So first of all, it boots up an Ubuntu server and with write permissions. Then there are several steps. The first one, I think that's always the case. You need to check out the repository. Then it needs to set up the node packet manager. If you don't know what that is, that's like in Java, where you have Maven or Gradle. On the front-end side, you have this so-called node package manager thingies, which are your build tools. And one of them, a more recent version or approach, is this pnpm. Don't ask me what that stands for. It's, from what I know, I'm not an expert on that side, it's an improved version of the normal npm, the node package manager, by reducing the size that your node modules folder will have, because it somehow has a smarter approach when it comes to dependency resolution. That's just from what I know. Then it needs to set up Node.js, because we need that to download the dependencies and run this node package manager and bundle then Angular. And the environment for that is the Node.js environment. Then it executes pnpm install, which is just downloading all the dependencies which are defined in our build script. Then it builds the Angular app. So there you have this ng builds that we want to build for production. And here is an important part. So it puts everything that gets compiled into a so-called docs folder. You can name that whatever you want. And you also need to define a base reference. So this link here, which in my case is it needs to match the repository name. So Gdx Quilly Utils, and here it's also Gdx Quilly Utils. That one is important. That last part here, the base href references your GitHub repository name. Then this one, I'm not sure. I think that's an optional step. I just read that somewhere that people are doing that, and it's a best practice to simply copy your index HTML, which gets created from the previous step, and call it 404 HTML, which is usually resource not found. And I guess you get then still the page visually instead of a generic error page, but not 100% sure. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what that step is doing. I just saw that in a blog post that I followed, and that's why I also added that here. And finally, and that's the most important one, that's then the deployment to the GitHub pages. And I used that specific action from this James Ives. There are several GitHub pages actions from what I found, and the only one that worked for me was this one. I don't know, maybe most likely I did something wrong with the other actions, but that one here worked for me, and that was the most straightforward approach for me. So what you say here is basically from to which branch it should deploy. So that would be this GitHub pages branch that we have created, or that you need to prepare on your repository. And what kind of content will it deploy to that branch? And that would be, as you remember from before, we have the documents folder where we are creating our Angular app in. And from the documents folder, there we need the browser folder. This is something new since I don't know, Angular 17, 18, something like that. Since they introduced also, is it called server components? And you have, or you can have different folders. You have the browser folder where you have the stuff which is running on the front end on the client side. And then you could also have some things that are running on a backend, which would be then, I think in React it's called server components. I don't know how it's called in Angular. And there you have then also a server folder. And since that one is, again, not working with GitHub pages, there is no backend, nothing available. We can only deploy the front end, the client side stuff. So that's why we need to deploy the browser folder from that. And that's it. So basically, whenever we commit something to the master or when we manually run that action, we're checking out the repository, we build everything, download the dependencies, build our app in a specific folder. We need to set the base href. That one is important. And also the last one is important, the GitHub pages deployment, where we simply say what kind of folder it should deploy. And when we check that out, so our GitHub pages branch here, so the things that you see here, that's the content of the documents folder when we build it. Do I have it? Yes, I have it here. So there you see documents folder, browser folder, and there is then the content in it, which then gets deployed to that GitHub pages branch. And then GitHub automatically does something in the background to then host that stuff on a predefined link. That one is also automatically created. You can change it from what I have seen, but there are also certain limitations to it. And I think for special things, you also need to pay, of course, because if you need your own domain, you need to pay. I don't know how expensive that is per year. So I simply kept it with the default. It's again free and I like free stuff. And yeah, that's it. So if you were interested how that works, then now you know. Also, if I know I have a few 2 or 3 front-end developers in my community. If so, and if you are motivated, please feel free to check out the code, because I would be interested if there would be some improvements that can be made, or if there are obvious mistakes that I made, because I'm not a front-end expert. I'm usually working on back-end stuff with Java. Front-end, I know a little bit the theory and know a couple of tools or frameworks there, but again, I'm not an expert. So I would be interested if there are people out there which know that better, and then please share your feedback if there are some things that I did not solve in a good way and which should be solved in a better way, then just let me know. Okay, and finally, what I wanted to talk about is the AI functionality. So if you don't know it, since IntelliJ 2025, which was released, I think 2 months ago, they now have a free tier for the AI assistant, AI chat, and also for something new, which they call a Junie, which is like the, how is it called in Visual Studio Code? The agent mode, so that the AI is automatically creating code for you or doing something for you. And especially these Angular projects, so the Masamune page and also this Gdx Quilly Utils, I created that using Junie most of the time. And to be honest, I was quite surprised how good it is. So again, it could be that everything that is written down here is, of course, complete garbage, and front-end expert would do that completely differently. Could be the case. I cannot judge that. I just see what I get in the end. So the final product, the web page here. No, I just see that one here and the different functionality. And it's working, so for me it's fine. I don't care if it's perfect in the background or not. I do care, of course, but I don't know if it could be done better. And in the end, for me, the important part is that things are working. And again, I was really surprised how good that is. It takes quite some time to fulfill a task. And I could imagine that because those are really small projects, it's beginner projects like the to-do lists that you are often writing when you learn something new. So maybe that's the case why it's performing so well. But again, so to give you an example, so initially, of course, I had some ideas in mind. I created the Angular app. I added some dependencies that I needed. I looked into what kind of possibilities there are. So, for example, to parse the XML file for the Masamune web page with JavaScript, or how to make some image manipulation on the client side with this chimp library. So those are the things that I looked up, and because there I wanted to have the control and really see what people are using and what is recommended. There I don't just blindly trust the AI, which also here as a note, never do that. Always cross-check what it's doing. But in the end, what I then did, I just wrote here a prompt like, create me a route in my Angular version 19 app using Tailwind CSS and Daisy UI. These are the libraries that I use for the components. Then I described something that on this page, there should be a settings area where, for example, like here on that page, a settings area where a user can upload an image. He can specify a tile width, height, margin, and so on. There should be a button to trigger the tile extruder tool, which is that one with that specific version. And there should be a download button. So something like that. And in the end, I would say 95% of the code that was created was already good enough. So it looked almost like that already. There were maybe some minor adjustments that I had to do, but basically it did a very good job with getting all of that done. Also creating the TypeScript code with the interaction, so that when I select here an image, that this is then converted in the background. Also that in the download that it creates these blob objects and everything, or the zip file, for example, on the other side. So I would say like 95% of the job was always done. And then in the end, of course, I had to try it out a little bit. I reviewed the code all the time, and I had to manually adjust a little bit, or fix something if something was not the way I intended it to be. But in the end, I was really, really positively surprised how good that is. Also, that you can use it for free, at least at the moment. It really helped me a lot because, again, I'm not a front-end expert, and I don't want to watch another YouTube tutorial series where someone is creating a to-do list app and then remember all the syntax and Angular specifics, because I anyway will forget them in like a month again when I don't work with that anymore. So there, for me personally, the AI really helped a lot because I did not need to look a lot into the documentation stuff or anything. It simply created everything already correctly. There was one specific case that I want to mention. Do I have it here? No, let me go here. Like this one. So the people out there who know Angular, and from there, you know that in the past, at least, I don't know which Angular version, but in the past, there were always special Angular keywords or whatever you want to call it. There was like an ng-if you wanted to render something conditionally, or ng-for, if I remember correctly. If you wanted to have a for loop in your Angular context somehow. And since Angular 17, I don't know, they have a different approach. In my opinion, a more readable approach and easier to understand approach with simply add if or add for, and then a special syntax there. And initially in the empty project, the AI still used the old syntax, because most likely that's the training data that was used, and that's how it knows how things worked. And then I just adjusted it manually to the new approach that I know it should use. And then for future pages, so for the second and third page, it already did that correctly. So somehow it reads through my repository, knows how things are done or learns automatically how things are done and then applies that to future pages as well. So that was for me, again, quite impressive what it did there. However, there is at least one downside. There would be more downsides, but I want to talk about maybe two things. The first one is that the AI never refactored, or at least in my case, it never refactored or reused any of the code. So for example, validations, if you, let me check here. So the tile width must be an integer number. So I cannot enter here letters, which is anyway blocked by the browser, but I cannot enter here a .2 or .3 that is validated here. And there it always simply copied over the same code to 3 different pages. So a lot of code redundancy. And it doesn't need to care because it's not writing code or anything. So it simply provides me what I need to do. Maybe it doesn't have the refactoring learned yet. I don't know. Anyway, so what I had to do at some point, I then told it, hey, again, in this Juni thing here, I wrote something like refactor, for example, the validations that we are using in the image combine component, the tile extruder and image split component, extracted to, I want to just have one file where all that logic resides and use best practices that you know for Angular projects. So a hint like that I have also added. And in the end, it really does then the refactoring. So it removes then the duplicated methods and everything. And in my case, for example, for the validations, it created a validation service, added some documentations to the different methods, which it understood from the context, and then reused those methods in the different components. So also there, it was really, really helpful and useful to me. And one thing that I want to mention that I never blindly simply trusted and take over everything that it creates. I always cross-checked the code, which my personal approach here is I have a Git repository. And whenever I have a working state, I at least commit, maybe I don't push, but at least I commit something. And then I enter an AI prompt and let it do its things. And then I simply go to the change list in the commit or in the Git dialog to see what kind of modifications it made and also to understand what it's doing. And for me personally, I also learned quite a lot of things because, again, with Angular, I was not that familiar. And yeah, it showed me certain things which are possible there, which I found quite interesting and which I never heard before. So I also learned quite a lot of things from here. But that's one downside. So you really need to be careful with refactoring and so on, that the code doesn't simply explode and that it still gets manageable and also still follows some best practices, I would say, to have a clean code base. And the second thing, which I find in general a little bit dangerous, I would say, with the AI tools. So for me personally, I'm now 39 years old. I do programming since I'm 17. I do backend development where I integrate different systems with REST APIs or with file exchange and custom codes and things like that. I do that over 10 years, I don't know, maybe 14 years already or 15 years. So I would call myself, let's call myself an expert to backend stuff. I don't like that word. I hate it. Let's call me an experienced backend developer. I think that's a fitting name. So when I see backend code which would be created by the AI, and I've seen code like that, there I immediately see if something is garbage or bad, or if it uses very old approaches or even wrong approaches. I have seen unit tests where the AI claims that it's creating mocks and runs a test against a mock, but it never created a mock. It simply created a new instance of a class and things like that. So for me, that was obvious, and I know when it's doing something wrong. But still, again, I don't want to talk too bad about it. I still see that it has some benefits, especially when it comes to generating boilerplate code, or let's not call it generic code, but code that I have written already thousands of times. So for example, going through a list with a stream, mapping it to a different object, collecting it to a list, iterating over that, whatever. I have written that thousands of times. So if that part gets taken away by AI and it simply creates all of that with a simple prompt that I'm entering, then I'm more than happy about that, because I want to think about problems and implement solutions, and I don't want to code the 1000th for loop or stream mapping reduce stuff. I don't care about that, or create a stupid DTO for Hibernate between different layers, blah, yada, yada, yada. So that's fine by me if that gets taken over. But again, I have learned it the old way. I have quite a lot of knowledge about these things, and I know when the AI is doing something or creating code, I understand what it's doing, and I know how to fix it or modify it or throw it away if it's completely garbage. For this front-end project with Angular, it's a little bit different. I know a little bit, but I am not an expert on that side. So whatever it created there, most of the things, I have no idea if that is good or bad. If there would be maybe security risks or whatever, I simply cannot judge on that because I'm not that experienced enough. And there I see a little bit of a problem for young developers, because often I see in YouTube comments and also in some talks that I'm following that people are praising AI like, whoa, it's the holy grail for junior developers. They are so super productive and so good. And I doubt that a little bit. So I am more of the opinion that it's useful or can be very useful for senior developers, which know their things and have a good knowledge because they can judge on what's happening. For junior developers, if they are just getting presented, like in my case, I don't know, 300 lines of code changes with HTML, TypeScript code, maybe even some CSS, I would claim that they don't understand everything that is happening there. And if there would be a problem, they wouldn't know how to fix it because they simply have not enough knowledge about their things. So I'm here a little bit, I don't know how to say that, but I see the problem that the younger generation, which comes now after me, if they more or less blindly rely on all these artificial intelligence tools, and I'm pretty sure they are getting better and better in the future, and they will replace certain things in our programming life. So they will not fall away. They are here to stay. But I'm a little bit afraid that the younger ones which come after us, they don't really learn or understand what's really happening in the background. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is not needed anymore in the future because AI is simply getting perfect, and you just need to make another prompt and it fixes everything, and you don't need to look at codes at all anymore, and everything is just working perfectly. But I don't think so. I personally think that you still need, especially good developers or software engineers, whatever you want to call them, because definitely there will be problems with whatever AI is creating. And also, again, this is a simple project, but in a more complex project that you have in your work environment where you have different systems, you need to integrate them, different tech stacks and so on, and where you need to think a lot about it. I think you cannot blindly rely on that, and you really still need a lot of knowledge and experience to correctly support that, and also be possible to add some new functionality properly to your code base. And again, with younger people, if they are just, let's call it stupid prompt engineers, it's not stupid, but if they are just prompt engineers and just talking here, that the vibe coding, that's a good term that I've read recently. If they are just vibe coders, I'm a little bit afraid of what's happening in the future, because they will not be able, in my opinion, to solve certain problems. When they get, for me, a typical example would be, for example, a Spring stack trace where a bean is not properly initialized because of something. They will not be able to understand what is wrong and how to fix it. They will just prompt and prompt again and pray to the gods that at some point the AI is fixing the solutions. But I have seen AI guiding you into one way and hallucinating the shit out of it. Where at some point, if you don't have the knowledge, of course, you trust it and try again and again and again. But if you have the knowledge, you know when it's hallucinating and guiding you into a wrong direction. And then you just have to stop it and still go back to what we were used to a couple of years ago, to follow Stack Overflow, official documentation of the framework, and fix the error by that. And so I want to stop the video at that point. It's just some thoughts that I have about AI. Oh, maybe one last thing. That's really it. About the different models. So just for my personal experience, I am very, very positively surprised and impressed by the Gemini 2.5 Pro model. That really produced very, very good code and also seems to have the knowledge about the modern library versions. So that one also gave me the proper Angular 19 code, while, for example, the 2.5 Flash, or which else did I think Claude 3.5 Sonnet, they gave me always outdated code or code that wasn't even working. So those models were, I would say, quite bad for programming. In training that I had at my company there, we used GPT 4.1. That one was also quite good for coding. There we had what was it? Not Hibernate. Quarkus with, I'm stupid, I cannot remember the name. The microservices thingy with the Helm charts and everything. You know what I mean. So anyway, in a Java environment, and there the model was, or the code that it generated and also the knowledge that it had with GPT 4.1 was very good. 4.0 or 4.0, I don't know what it is. Is it a 0 or an O? That one was not so good, especially also with Java unit tests. It was not that impressive. So my personal recommendation would be Gemini 2.5 Pro. There, personally, I was really happy with that. And as an alternative, if you run out of free credits or whatever they call it, then switch to GPT 4.1. Okay, but that's really it from my point of view. Thanks for watching and listening to the end. If you are still there, again, I would be interested in feedback and comments below. Let me know. And other than that, wish you a nice start on the next week, and bye-bye.